With us now from his home state of Indiana is former Vice President Mike Pence, who leads the conservative group Advancing American Freedom. Mr. Vice President, happy Father's Day. Thank you for being with us.
You too, Chris. Great to be on. Thank you.
More than a year ago, you called for American military action against Iran, writing in the Wall Street Journal that Tehran's nuclear program, Navy, and oil infrastructure should be on our hit list. Well, the Israelis went after two of the three, with many expecting moves against Iran's Navy soon, especially if they interfere with shipping in their region. Now Israel wants the United States to help, providing the long-range bombers needed to hit deeply fortified targets. Do you think we should do that?
Well, Chris, I think if the world knows nothing else, the world should know that America stands with Israel. What happened on Friday morning was a courageous act by Israeli Defense Forces to take action that was necessary to prevent the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world from ever obtaining a usable nuclear weapon. And from my standpoint, it was a righteous act, and the United States should continue to provide material support to Israel. Israel acted alone on Friday morning, but Israel is not alone. And as this fight unfolds, it needs to remain the position of the United States of America that we will support Israel in any way that is necessary to ensure that Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon, and that the uranium enrichment program in Iran is either verifiably dismantled or completely destroyed.
President Trump was elected in part on a promise to keep the United States out of conflicts overseas, not escalate them. There are many in and outside of the political movement he leads who are adamantly opposed to any U.S. involvement other than maybe defensive aid to Israel. And that has also been part of the discussion around the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Do they have a point? Shouldn't we fear the repercussions of being part of another offensive effort in the Middle East?
Well, I honestly believe that in their heart of hearts, the American people know that America is a leader of the free world. We saw that military parade in Washington, D.C. yesterday, celebrating 250 years of the U.S. Army. It's been the American Army, different than any other army in the history of the world, that has not just defended our freedom, but we fought for, and our men and women have died to win and secure the freedom of other people. That's never changed, Chris, and I really do believe that whether it be in Eastern Europe, or whether it be in the Asia Pacific, or whether it be with our most cherished ally, Israel, the American people will continue to support efforts by this administration to give our allies the resources and support they need to win their fight for freedom. I honestly believe, though, that in the case of Israel, that this is a moment where it's not just about Israel's defense. And I know those isolationist voices that have been calling for cutting off aid in Eastern Europe, and some even this week on the outside of the administration have incomprehensibly called for dumping Israel. I think that was the word. But that shows a tremendous lack of understanding about what Iran represents. Iran supported Hamas. They support Hezbollah. They support the Houthis. They not only breathe death to Israel, but death to America. And it's absolutely imperative that we support Israel in this cause to ensure that Iran never obtains the means to develop a nuclear weapon that could be used against Israel or the United States of America.
So I think, to no one's surprise, Iran withdrew from the U.S.-led talks that were supposed to take place today in Oman. The Israelis apparently believe that these talks were just the Iranians playing for time so that they could continue on their path to obtaining a nuclear weapon. But the reasoning that we hear behind the administration's push for a deal is that continuing confrontation between between Iran and the West only empowers Iranian hardliners and makes the prospects for a lasting peace even more remote. What do you say about that argument? And it's something we've heard from multiple administrations.
Well, I welcome the cessation of hostilities through negotiations, Chris, but there can be no compromise on ensuring that the Iranian nuclear enrichment program is either verifiably dismantled or destroyed. And look, the administration continued to engage on that. The president made it clear that the door is still open, but I also welcome the president's message this morning, which harkened back to the message he delivered after we took out Qasem Soleimani in 2019, that as this conflict unfurls between Israel and its right of self-defense and the mullahs in Tehran, that there will be no attacks permitted against American forces or interest in the region without overwhelming response by our military against Iran.
Okay, turning now to domestic matters, you and your team at Advancing American Freedom are trying to put some pressure on Senate Republicans for some more fiscal responsibility in the multi-trillion-dollar reconciliation package. It's working its way over there. The Independence Day deadline for Senate action looks unlikely already. Republican leaders in the Senate are not interested in starting over on a process that has already taken much longer than the president and they wanted. Substantial changes could jeopardize the passage of broadly popular provisions like the extension of current tax rates. Is it worth the risk of taking this back to the drawing board and trying to cut some of the spending and deal with the taxes in a different way?
I think there's no higher domestic priority apart from border security and law and order than ensuring that the American people aren't faced with a nearly $5 trillion tax increase at the end of this year. If we don't extend those Trump-Pence tax cuts, the average American family is going to see about a $2,000 increase in taxes in 2026, Chris. And so, to me, that's the priority of the big, beautiful bill. I welcome the early steps of reform, introducing work requirements in Medicaid. But I think we got to keep our eye on the ball, encourage senators. We're encouraging senators to if they change the bill, change the things that will distract or draw attention away from the fact that we simply have to extend and make permanent those tax cuts. I welcome the making permanent several of the business tax cuts that also are in there, but the end of the day, that's the priority. But Chris, you've known me a long time. Look, we have got to generate both the political will and the leadership in this country that levels with the American people. A $36 trillion national debt will not be resolved by nibbling around the edges of domestic spending. We're going to have to bring significant common sense reforms to entitlements, and I'm going to continue to be a voice for that.
Okay, you have denounced, I read today, your message, you denounced those murders in Minnesota, and you offered prayers for the victims and their families. It's especially poignant because you've been the target of political violence yourself, famously on January 6, 2021. A lot of Americans hear about these things, and they look at the violent clashes in the streets, and they worry that we may be locked in a destructive cycle. You've thought about this, you've prayed about this, you've wrestled with this. How do we break out of this cycle that seems to be afflicting us year after year?
Well, I think first and foremost, Karen and I prayed this morning for State Representative Hortman's family, her husband, who was also taken, colleagues injured, and law enforcement that's still on the hunt in Minnesota. I think the answer is swift and certain law enforcement. And our prayers are also with the people that are hunting down this despicable man who literally posed as a police officer at the front door of this state legislator's home and took their lives. Look, I know there's always a temptation for people to look at trends. You know, I remember 8 years ago at the congressional baseball game when my friend Steve Scalise nearly lost his life. Others were injured by a gunman who professed to be inspired by another network and by Bernie Sanders. And I denounced any shifting of blame at that time. And now, as we live in a time when we've seen 2 assassination attempts on President Trump during his campaign, when we've seen an attack on the home of the governor of Pennsylvania, an attack on Jewish protesters, I honestly think the answer here is to see that these people are prosecuted swiftly and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And there is no antidote for law and order, for making it very clear that there will be no tolerance in this country for political violence, whatever its motivation. And I believe instances such as this must be universally condemned.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.